Just getting a little bit ready before we start. Should be ready to hit go on the streams lecture in a minute. Okay, getting closer. Should be getting some video through to Microsoft Stream for you now. Thanks for everyone's patience. Cool. All right. Open my Teams window. Alrighty, where are we at? Start my recording. Get my remote control thing connected. Sweet. Hello everybody, welcome to Com 1720/6720, week 2, lecture 1, bright and early, 11 AM on Monday. Thank you so much for joining me online, for everyone who is here, ready to listen online and chat interactively with me. Thank you so much to everyone who will be watching this after the fact on Echo 360, YouTube, Microsoft Stream. Hello, people in the chat. To make sure we got all the chat going. Make sure I got my blackboard thing here. I can draw a little hat. Oh, I need something more fun than that to do a hat. Red hair coming out of my regular hair. I guess I can't do googly eyes on myself. Oh, it's not going to be long enough. This is very silly. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just being interactive. Interactive learning. Cool. That works. Here we are in week 2. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's lecture is on the topic of types and variables, but we'll be doing a little bit of admin to get us started. As always, these lectures are a mix of some theory, some chat, and a few demos in P5. So, without going too much further into the details of what we're going to say, I might just start saying it. Make myself small and move on. A little brief recap of some of the admin stuff we talked about last week. As it's week 2, I know that there will be some folks listening today who only just joined us in the class. Welcome to you who've joined us here starting in week 2. I know that often there's a bit of changing of electives, particularly in week 1 of any semester, and I know a few students have joined us over the weekend. If there's folks who haven't quite joined the team yet, I see a few people asking to join. See if I can get those people in. They're already a member now. Accept all. Yeah. Yep. I want to make sure that everyone is here and ready for the lecture. Back to my lecture. So today's topic, we're going to talk about how we store numbers in P5. We're talking about how we can take some numbers, reuse them, and how they might change over time within a sketch. I'll just make sure my volume over here is muted. That's a little bit annoying. Very quiet. You can have a very quiet boop. How do we store numbers, small bits of information that change over time in our sketch? And how can this make our sketches dynamic rather than just static? We'll do a little bit of praxis about first steps with interaction with P5.js using the mouse, which is a lot of fun to try out. But first and foremost, a little bit of admin corner. Admin corner. Just going to the website, you'll see that we have our lecture page. You can find all of these lectures online. If you want to have a look at the slides, they're available here on the left-hand area. So if you haven't had a look around the website, I encourage you to do that. If you look at this website and you look at any other website that you're used to at the moment, like Wattle, you'll notice that the colors on Wattle are all different. I can't see them anymore, but like, the colors recently changed on all of the ANU websites, and now we're doing this white and gold thing, which I find quite pretty and elegant. And our course website is still the old color scheme. But I guess I'm here to say not for long, so don't get too wedded to the nice red stripe and the black and grey header. There's some work afoot, changes afoot to have a slightly different website look, so all of the content will still be there. There might be a few little things tweaked, but the lectures will still be online and available to you. The other little... Oops, I've completely lost my lecture as well. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the labs have started this week, or do start this week, and they will be the first lab starting tomorrow at 11, if you're an 11 a.m. Tuesday person. So if you're in this course and you're new, you need to make sure that you have signed up for a lab, because lab work is assessed between weeks 2 and 11. There's 10 labs. Each lab requires you to complete a pre-lab task, and your pre-lab task is due before the lab starts. So you can't come into the lab, work on your pre-lab task, put it onto the discourse forum, and hope that that's going to be okay. Unfortunately, we automatically check when your posts were made, and if they're made after your lab starts, that's a late submission. So go onto the labs page, make sure you know which lab group you're in, make sure you attend your lab this week. If you don't have a lab group, make sure you join one on Streams. And I know we're absolutely at capacity this semester. We've had huge interest in students joining us, which is fantastic. But that means that we're running very low on lab places, and I know there are a few folks who can't find one that they need. For those few people who we haven't accommodated yet, please get in touch with me on the course forum following the getting help procedure. By the way, if you find that you ever need any help with anything in Comp 1720, you do need to talk to me, you need to talk to your tutor. Getting help page has our list of priorities. First thing to do is, before you ask for help, have a look at the website, because we do have information here that covers almost every circumstance. People keep trying to join the team, which is exciting. Oh, I think they're probably in it already. Oh well. Someone wants to edit their post. That's totally fine. You want to edit your post for the pre-lab. If you need help, make sure you've read the whole website. I know there's a lot here, but particularly the resources page. we've got an FAQ, frequently asked questions. We do get a lot of questions many times. I have 220 students in this course. If you're asking, how do I sign up for labs? Well, about 50 people have already asked that question, so we have it in the FAQ. Where should I submit the pre-lab task? How do I submit the pre-lab task? That's a very good question. Did you read the website? I would go to the Getting Help, my Getting Help procedure. Someone's literally just asked for help in the team, and they, I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt. They haven't gone through the Getting Help procedure. Have you read the website yet? If you need to know, if you can't find that information on the website, you can check on the forum. And if you can't find that information on the forum, or you have something which is desperately important or secret or private and you need to message me, please do so through Discourse messages. Sending me an email is a bad idea because I get lots of emails, lots of automatic emails from various things, and your email with your important question might end up stuck in a group of about 20 emails that I don't get to for about 3 days. And if that happens, maybe your problem will get worse or not get sorted out in a timely manner. So definitely going to the forum, private messages or public posts are the best thing to do. Now, someone was asking, how do I submit my pre-lab task? Well, what I would do is go to assessments on the website and have a look at the lab tasks item. And this will tell you what to do. We've got links to all these places in different areas, but because you're doing lab assessments every week, we have a particular page just to set out what the procedure is. So here is your pre-lab assessment. Here's the process for doing your pre-lab entry. Go onto the Comp 1720 forum. You find the Comp 1720 pre-lab subcategory. So here's the Comp 1720 forum. I'm going to go to the pre-lab subcategory. Whoops, there it is. And you can see a lot of other people have their pre-labs here. I guess one comment I'm going to make about the pre-labs so far, people have done amazing, fantastic work. I've been looking at them. Very proud of you. If your title of your post is Week 2 Pre-Lab, that's not very exciting for us to read. Why don't you type in something that is about what you're writing, right? What artworks are you talking about? What point are you trying to make? You don't need to put your name in the title. Someone, Xuan Feng, has put his name here, and someone's put their U number. I know who it's from because I can see who the author of that post is, and that's how we find these. Your tutors find them. Actually, behind the scenes, your tutors get an automatically generated list of all of the pre-labs for their lab to check them all. You don't need to do any special labels or anything for them. They just need to be in the pre-lab category, pre-lab subcategory, and they need to have week 2 as the tag, and our script finds them automatically. Someone's a monkey. I don't know what that means. Oh, monkey see, monkey do. Okay, cool. You do you then. Wow, look at all these pre-labs. You guys are amazing. With a big class, we end up with a lot of pre-lab exercises. There's more than 200 people in the class. There's going to be 10 pre-lab posts that you make on Discourse. There's going to be 2,000 or more than 2,000 posts. So this is going to be an absolutely huge category with a lot of interesting information about art. What I would say about your pre-lab tasks, I'll just go to lab 2. This is the one you have to do this week. Pre-lab task is here. There's your little motivation. You have to do a short writing task, and you only need to write 100 to 200 words. So I see some people starting to write a long essay. I don't want you to do that not exactly because it's not wanted. I don't want you to do the thinking, but this is only supposed to be a small assessment task, and I don't want you to spend so much time on it that you are taking time away from other things. You're working with code, making sure you're ready for your lab, working on your assignments, working on stuff for other courses. If you're really into it and you want to write a long essay, that's fine, but we're probably only going to check it, give it the amount of time to check that they're there that we would require if you'd written 100 words. So if you're writing 2,000 words, we will still give it the same small amount of time just to check that it makes sense. So don't go overboard in your pre-labs. It's just a matter of getting yourself thinking, getting yourself prepared for your lab. Your in-lab tasks will be more obvious. You have to just go through these tasks within the lab, and then during the lab, your tutor will keep an eye on you and make sure that you've accomplished those things. It's very important to note that in every lab in this class, we have collaborative tasks where you have to work with other students. So make sure that you do get in there and talk to your friends in the class, your colleagues, complete the collaborative tasks. If you don't do that collaboration, then you won't be getting a full tick for that lab, a full mark. Last little important bit of course assessment admin. What happens if you don't finish your lab task within your lab? Someone's asked me that question. Good question. You will, because the lab tasks are designed to be something that you can finish within the lab. And they're designed to be, how shall I put this, easy and accomplishable by everybody. So I know there are some people who will have a little bit of trouble. Hopefully that's the minority. But in general, if you're not finishing them, that means you won't get the full mark for that lab. But generally that means you haven't gone to your lab or you've had to leave early or something rather than having to be there. So the lab tasks are designed to be something that everyone can accomplish within that period of time without being too stressed. So it's not supposed to be a stress battle. It's just supposed to be some basic tasks. And then in each lab, I'll put in there, I haven't done it yet for week 2, but we'll have some extra tasks, which are things to challenge you once you've finished your lab tasks. Now, assignment 1 is released. I talked about this last week. I want to remind you, and particularly note for anyone who's new, that the first assignment for this lab is here. It's here already, and it's due in week 4. So it's due the Monday after next. 2 Mondays time, 16th of August. Oh my gosh, it's already due in week 4. There's only 2 weeks to do it. That's not too bad because this assignment is designed, again, it's designed to be a starter assignment. And if you paid attention to what we did last week in the 2 lectures, you completed the week 1 starter lab and you got your circle on the internet, then you've got everything you need to do a great assignment. I'm serious. It sounds crazy, right? But this assignment is all about just doing a static artwork created in P5. That's a name tag, a very simple task. It has to have your name on it. It has to be interesting and artistic. You can be as creative as you like, but you don't need to have the technical detail that we will cover over the next few weeks to do this lab task. It's something you can completely do, to do this assignment. It's something you can completely do with week 1 work. I've heard there's been a bit of discussion already on the Discourse forum about this task, particularly about the be a name tag bit and being readable. And some people interpret this like, oh, I need to go out and get a great font. I'm like, well, no, I haven't talked about fonts. I've talked about drawing things. Just draw your name. Use rects and ellipses and colors and draw your name in a creative way. Of course, if you want to use fonts, that's great too, but we know that fonts have some tricky details in P5, so you can start to get into a more complicated place than you might have wanted to be. I know that when you try to draw text on a computer, normally we use a font, but maybe you could just use squares and circles instead. How about that? That would be kind of cool. That's all I'll say about the assignment for the moment. I want to just draw attention to something really cool that happened on the forum. So one of our students this semester, Avery Rowe, created a outline diagram of all the tools in COM 1720. And I just want to pause and have a look at this because I think that this is something which the CS nerds, I'm one of them, sometimes forget about people who are joining us for the first time in a computing course, which is that we CS nerds, we love our tools on our computers. Ooh, we love our different programs and different things for doing different tasks. And if you're a new student to computing, you've never done it before, the number of new words describing a program that happened in week 1 would have been like more than 10. You would never have heard of p5.js. You probably maybe have heard of JavaScript, but not sure what that is. Never heard of GitLab. Not sure what Discourse is. Not sure why we have this thing called VS Code. What is that? Not sure why our web pages are on a different website and not on Wattle. That's all a bit confusing, isn't it? So thank you, Avery. This was set out really, really clearly. And I might just annotate it a little bit to show things which are really, really important. Most important thing on this list is the CS website. That is super, super important. That's the main course website, cs.anu.edu.au/courses/comp1720. If you're going to the Wattle, you're going to get a bit confused because we don't use Wattle in the same way as other courses. All the Wattle has is links back to our main website. Second most important thing, GitLab. GitLab is like the Wattle in some sense because it's where your assignments and submitted lab work will show up. So if you don't know how to use GitLab, and I know GitLab's a bit of a pain sometimes, it is confusing. If you're not comfortable with it, you're going to find it hard to submit assignments. That's why we made you use GitLab in week 1. That's why you're going to be using GitLab again in week 2, just to submit a kind of pledge of integrity that you are going to behave as a good student in this course. It's an exercise to talk about integrity, but also just to practice again using GitLab because it's necessary for your assignment. Other really important thing, the Discourse forum, Comp1720 forum, is super duper important. You need to use that every week to submit your pre-lab. And if you have any problem in the course that you need to be addressed by me or a tutor, talk to us on the GitLab. Someone's asked, is GitLab, or talk to us on the Discourse, sorry. Someone just asked, is GitLab a Git server like GitHub? Yeah, that's a good question which I don't expect everyone to understand why it makes sense, but it does. GitLab is an alternative product to GitLab. GitHub and GitLab are very similar, but we run GitLab is a product you can buy and run it on your own server, and we have a GitLab installation running here within computer science just for our students to be submitting their assignments, and many of our classes use it and it works really well, but I know it's a little bit challenging for a new person. Okay, second tier of importance is knowing how to use VS Code. I say it's a second tier of importance because I suppose the first thing you need to do is to be able to submit an assignment, but if you have VS Code then you can do the assignment. So and it seems like VS Code should be the first most important thing, but if you don't have this important information, you don't have ways to ask questions, then you won't know what to do. But learning to use VS Code is very, very important. And I was trying to find a good analogy, but we think of there's tools like Microsoft Word on your computer, or Teams, or Outlook, or Mail. I'm trying to find hard to think of a non-Microsoft one, but they're tools that do a certain job, right? And of course, you can pick up that tool and maybe do a different job with it, or turn it upside down, and you can use it in a creative way. But VS Code is an editor, and that means that it's not just a tool, it's like a workshop, or a craft room or something, or a makerspace. It's a program that you actually customize to work in your own way. That's why the first thing you did was install an extension. So we've developed some customizations for you that are useful for doing this course, and that comes as an extension that you install into VS Code. So maybe we'll talk a bit more about editors another day, but a very, very important thing. Thank you, Avery, so much for this cool graphic. Final little bit of information, make sure when you visit the course forum, which you should be doing this week, you set up your email notification preferences so that if you end up with a message on Discourse, if I send you a message from Discourse or the tutors do, that you actually receive it. Because one of my main ways of talking to students in the course, individual students like you, is to send you a message through Discourse. What will typically happen is it's like 3 days before the assignment is due, I can see that about half the students have started it and submitted an early attempt, and maybe the rest haven't started it and haven't submitted an early attempt. And I might start sending people messages being like, hi there, everything okay? Do you know how to use GitLab? If you need help, go to these places. And the way I send you those messages is through Discourse. How do we send messages on Discourse? Very good question. How do I send a message? So you might see new topic, things, edit. This is not how you send a message. You click on your face, you go to the little message box, and you do something. I've forgotten. There's a link on the website. Anyway, I've lost my messages. Oh, new message. I got to messages and I can press new message, and you can type some users there. Another good way to send a message is to go to the Getting Help page. Getting Help. And if there's a link here, private messages should go to the Discord, to the Comp 1720 admins group. If you click this link, you automatically get a message sent to the right person. So that message will go to me and go to all of my my tutors. They can all see it so that the right person gets the information. Hi, admins. I don't know how to GitLab. Help. I'm asking for help. Message. Oh, it needs to be more detailed than that. You can't send just 10 characters. Here are some more characters. I don't know how I've ended up with caps lock on. Message. I'll switch to anonymous mode. Okay. Now I don't know how to switch out of anonymous mode. Okay, cancel this. Cancel. You know what I mean. Let's get into the lecture. Last week we talked about how painting with a computer in P5 is like painting like a 5-year-old. 5-year-olds love to draw and they'll follow your instructions, but they only have a small vocabulary, and you need to look in the reference to find out exactly the words you need to use to talk to your drawing 5-year-old. The second important concept was that everything in P5 is a number. The area on the website that you're drawing is a number, colors are numbers. We've got this grid, starts in the top left-hand corner up here and comes down in the Y direction and across in the X direction. And we started to talk about different ways to change colors using the fill and stroke commands. We talked a little bit about how P5 communicates back to us through the console in your web browser. That's a bit of an advanced topic, but something we'll come to as we run into trouble in our demos. And the main way that the P5 communicates back to us is through the drawings that it makes on the screen and any sounds you play or things that you make it do. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this code concept called flow as a first item off the agenda. And then we will talk about types and variables, numbers that can change throughout your sketch. Let's get my window ready, VS Codium. Oh, cool, I've got my last week's sketch. I can go live in another window. There was my bad circles, cool. All right, we're ready. So, first things first, what's the flow through this piece of code? And by flow, I mean which commands get computed first and which commands get computed later and which commands get computed last. So each line of code, you can see, has one command. This one's got rect, this one's got ellipse command, this one's got the line command. So this one should be drawing a rectangle, this one's going to draw a circle down here somewhere. And then we got a line starting at xy 200, 200 and xy ending at xy 400, 400. So like that or something. Yeah, and someone's given me the answer. The top ones will happen first. This one happens first. This one happens second, and this one happens third. So far, so good. We know how these 3 lines of code get drawn. 1, 2, 3. Wow, you guys are mastering this already. It all seems very easy so far, but it does get a bit confusing. How about this one? Okay, we've got line, ellipse, rect. Well, what's the difference? This one starts with the line, then draws the ellipse, and then draws the rectangle. 1, 2, 3. So the question is, does this even matter? And I think we discovered last week when we were drawing some circles on top of each other that it does matter, because in P5, if you draw a shape on top of another one with a fill color, then it will sort of paint over the painting that you've already done. And sometimes that can be okay, it's what you mean to do, but sometimes it's not okay. And I remember one of the times it was not okay was drawing the background. So if you draw the background on top of your shapes, then the background will just be sort of flooding the whole browser with paint, making it all one color, and your drawing disappears. So we don't want that to happen, so you need to keep understanding of the flow. So every shape in P5 is painted on top of what was already on the canvas, so the order matters. And you can clear your canvas, painting it all with one color, using the background function, which we talked about last week. And remember, the background function, like the fill function and the stroke function, has some slightly different syntax options for what parameters you give it, what instructions you give it, to tell it to paint different colors or different kinds of color. Now we're going to talk about something a little bit more different, a little bit more difficult with our flow. And some students were asking me about this week. This is the setup and draw loop. And this is a P5 classic. It's a way of understanding how a program runs, which is pretty useful and makes a lot of sense. The way it works is that you've got two areas in your code. You might have seen it already when you were downloading these labs. One of them is called setup, the setup area, and one of them is called draw. You might notice in this, I've got a few lines of code that have two strokes at the start. And if a line starts with 2 forward slashes, it's called a comment. So that's just text there just for a human to read, and it's ignored by P5. So it's just for humans. You can put as much stuff as you want in comments, and it's pretty useful to keep notes to yourself or explain how your code works to someone else. Now, the concept here is that the setup code, anything in this area between these two brackets, this curly bracket 1 and this curly bracket closing it off, this code is going to run exactly one time just when your sketch starts. So it's a good place to do some code for setting things up. We'll talk about things you might like to set up later, but it sets things up in your code. Then we've got another area down the bottom called draw, with another 2 curly brackets. The curly brackets sort of delineate an area of code, so you can give it a name. In this case, we've given this area of code the name draw, and this area of code the name setup. So the second area of code, the draw area, is actually going to run after setup. P5 will go through all of these lines of code, and it's going to draw things on your browser. That's where you put code for doing your drawing. Draw things in the browser window. And when P5 gets to the bottom, it actually goes all the way back to the top again. So it's going to be running this, we call it the draw loop, because this area of code is going to run over and over and over again as your browser window is open. And in fact, every time you run the code in the draw loop, we're going to call that one frame. Just like the frames of an animation, right? One frame of animation will be one tour through the draw loop. So it's the flow of your program. Set up to start, then draw, 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 draw. Now later in the course, we'll be talking some more about flow and more about loops. At the moment, you've only got one loop, the draw loop. And the draw loop is already created for you. But in this course, you'll also be creating your own loops. So you can have flows that are a bit different than just set up, draw, 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 draw. But for now, we just have that setup and draw flow that's already built for you in P5. Things do start to get complicated when you make your own loops. It gets confusing, particularly if you've got loops within loops, or loops within loops within loops, oh my. Now, I guess when we look at this draw area, if this draw area does one thing, like draw a circle, which is what you've already done when you were making a circle go on the internet, 100, 100, 100, 100. Suppose that's all it does. Every time you run through the draw loop, it will just draw the same circle. And that's fine. What you'll see is just one circle staying there. But what if this ellipse actually, if these numbers changed as your draw loop was executing? Then we'll start to get something which is not static, but in fact dynamic. Yeah, I've already talked about this bit. We'll be talking, I'll give you a little demo of some dynamic code in a little bit. I just want you to remember that when you've got these little braces, squiggly brackets, parentheses, that will give you markers for where code starts and stops. I should do it this way, right? This is the opening bracket, this is the closing bracket. Here's a chunk of code in between, which could be repeating or could be reused in some way. And we talked a bit last week about these instructions, named instructions in P5, which are actually called a function. So you can see that the draw and setup areas are actually both functions. How do I know? Because it's written right just before it. That's how you tell, that's how you tell P5 that you want to make a function. You just write function, you write its name, then you write a place for the parameters to go. You're telling P5 what parameters you would like. There's nothing in here, so there's no function. That's like NA. And then there's the body of your code, the actual code which your function will run when it's called. We'll learn more about functions later when you start to make your own ones. And for now, we can do a bit of a demo. So what if, I think I need some more information here. So far we've got our, I'll just get set up with an ellipse. I might need a little bit more information before I can do my demo. Oops, what's happened to my code? I didn't save it, that's my problem. I just want one ellipse. There we go, red ellipse, or red circle. So before we explore flow changing, we have to talk about a few other things, some variables. I think you get the flow concept now. Here's some numbers. 7, that's easy. 654, 5.77. Number of planets in our solar system. So, are these all the same kind of number? That's a weird question, Charles. This is not a maths course, it's not a philosophy course, it's an art course or an art and computing course, but it's important for computing. So I've got 3 numbers here which you definitely know what they are. 7 is always 7, 654 is always 654, 5.77 is always 5.77, it never changes. How many planets do we have in the solar system? Is that one always the same number? Oh, one's a float, that's important. You can explain to me what a float is, and then I'll accept that as an answer. Int, float, int, int. One is clearly an English sentence. That's important information. This one is an English sentence. But we can sort of take an English sentence and use it as a placeholder for a number. So this one here is referring to a number that exists in the world. And in fact, it's a number which is not constant, right? Do you remember when there was a bit of drama about whether Pluto is a planet or not? When they decided for a little while that Pluto wasn't going to be a planet, so the number of planets in the solar system decreased by 1 for a while. And then there was some outcry and some discussion, and we looked at it again and decided that Pluto is a planet. I think that was the outcome of that. So the number of planets in the solar system is something which can change because it's designed by humans, or it's defined by humans. Oh, it only exists in our minds. But don't all numbers only exist in our minds? So I guess another thing, people have been pointing out some words like int, float, decimal, etc. Let's keep it simple. These ones are counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Counting things. Can a counting number be 0? Yes, we don't have any things. That means there's 0 things. Can we have negative numbers that are counting numbers? Maybe not, because you can't have negative 4 oranges. You can only have positive number of oranges or 0. There's another counting number. This number is not a counting number because it's got some partial numbers. It's a fraction or a decimal number. A number in between other numbers. So between 5 and 6, there's many other numbers in between. I would call those ones the natural numbers, that's right. So if we're doing a maths course, naturals. That one could be, I suppose 5.77 can be represented as a fraction, so it could be in the rationals numbers. I'm going into maths mode now, let's not do that. So numbers that are fractions can exist as well, but the main difference is that these ones are all constant. And this one is variable, depending on what the astronomers tell us on the day, right? And an astronomer could look up in the sky and say, oh no, we discovered another planet. We just never saw it before because it's black. We were looking for planets that weren't black, and then there was a black color planet on a black background. We never saw it. Sorry, guys. So we now have an extra planet. So this number of planets has changed. It's variable. It can change over time. Your age. There's another number which changes over time. Your age is a number which is only valid for 1 year, if you count your age in years. And then after that year of time, it changes to a different number. And we know there's a rule, right? Your age goes up by 1 every year, usually, unless you're born on a leap year on the 29th of February. That's a joke. What about that? That, my friends, is supposed to be a potato. I think it probably looks like a potato. Is that a number? It's probably represented by a number inside the computer, right? Because within your computer, there'll be some way of representing text, and every letter gets a number, and then all of the emojis get a number as well, and the potato symbol is an emoji, and it has a number. So now we're going to talk about one extra number which changes, a variable number within P5 called frame count. And this is one that we're going to use for animation. So what's this frame count thing? You can see I've used in this bit of code. Here's the setup function. First thing we do is create canvas. That's a useful way of making some space for us to draw within the browser. You can experiment with that. Then we draw a background. That draws a white background. 255 is white. Then we draw a rectangle. And we've got a 100, 100. So it starts at XY 100, 100. Then frame count, then 100. And in fact, frame count is a variable number which refers to the number of times we've gone through the draw loop. So I'm going to put this in here somewhere. Oops. Uh-oh. I've broken my computer. Oh, we're back. Well, this is bad. What's going on with Firefox? Quit. Close all my tabs. Get back Firefox. Get rid of my server. Get it back again. Okay, we got my sketch. I don't know what happened to Firefox there. I'm not going to do a rect. I'm going to do an ellipse. And we're going to start with an ellipse that is, oops, not frame count in capital letters, frame count. We might move it a little bit up. Ooh. We have a changing sketch within P5. As frame count becomes larger, every time we run through this draw loop, run down there, start again, run down there. I might make it a bit bigger. Sorry guys who can't see it, folks who can't see it. Every time we run through that draw loop, start again, we add 1 to frame count. So this ellipse is getting wider and wider and wider. Let's start it again. I'm just going to refresh my browser window, which will start the sketch again. Refresh it. There it goes. Well, that's fun. What else can we do? I might take that away and I'm going to make a smaller circle. And in fact, I'm going to put the frame count in the X location for the center of the circles where it's drawn. Well, this is very, very interesting. How come I'm not drawing a circle? I'm drawing a kind of line across the screen. What's wrong with my code? This might be the problem. I've got this line of code called background, which was going to flood the whole browser window with a certain color, and it's commented out. So when you comment out some code, it stops working. It's ignored by P5. So I might put that back in, background 255, and try this again. Okay, now I'm drawing a circle. Well, that's cool. So we can now make a sketch which will move a circle across the page. We put a moving circle on the internet, or at least on my local area. Oh, what about cos frame count? That's an idea. So you can use mathematical functions. I might make a second circle, in fact, and we'll apply something to that. Cos frame count. See what happens, hey? I'll just comment this one out and we'll use that one later as well. So if you are a student of maths, as many of you will have been in high school, if not now, you will know that the cos operator it's a function which operates on angles and gives you a number. Well, this is not very exciting because all of you students of maths out there might realize that, in fact, the cos function is an interesting number, but it does output something which is between -1 and 1. So I might multiply it by something and we'll get some motion. Oh, now we're getting a bigger, some faster motion. This is a bit weird. Maybe the cos was a bit too advanced for today. I might just stick to some simpler mathematical ideas. And I know what you're saying. I can see someone in the chat like really eager to get me to do something a certain way. Get the Geneva mechanism going. Yes, we'll get some crazy effects in the world if we do these things too much. I'm going to go back to my existing moving dot. I'll make 2 moving dots actually. they're moving at the same speed. This frame count is moving up by 1 pixel, moving across by 1 pixel every frame, and I can actually slow it down by multiplying that by 0.5. So now it's only going to move by 0.5 of a pixel every frame. So it should be half the speed of the first one. Let's see if this works. Ooh, the first one's racing ahead. It's like the Olympics, an Olympics of dots. Let's get some more. There should be different colors for different countries, but okay, this one's going to be, a little bit slower, but not that slow. And the first dot has 1. This one will be ahead, and then we'll make one which is like really slow. This is the one that maybe shouldn't have been in the Olympics, but they're there anyway. 300, 500, this one's going to be in the 700th line down, 900, and 1100. It's an Olympics of dots. Which dot is going to win? Oh, someone's asked, will this function still run even if we don't use frame count? It will. Even if whether you use frame count or not, draw is always going along in this loop. It doesn't look to see whether you've used frame count within it. All of them have crossed the finish line now except for the very slow one. That's weird. I would have thought that was the slow one down there. Oh, there's one off the page. I'll bunch them up a bit more. That can be 400s, this can be 500, that one can be 600s, and that one can be 700. I was missing one of my circles. There we go. We've got a very slow circle right at the bottom. That one shouldn't have been in the Olympics. Live debugging. I've got 5 dots now. There are 5 dots! Okay, enough with moving dots. Maybe I'll tell you one more thing, because this is really fun. We drew our background command, right? And the background command, as I mentioned, has lots of different parameters. Why did the last circle win? It was because the last circle was winning because my very slow circle wasn't on the screen at that particular time. We might want to jazz up our dots a little bit, make them feel like this feeling of speed and Olympic spirit, running for the finish line. We need some kind of speed blur effect going on. So we're going to use a combination of our flow, take advantage of our flow, and the background command to give us this kind of speed look. So I'm just looking at the background reference, and you can see there's lots of different ways of using the background command. You can use it to make a grayscale color with just 1 value, make an RGB color with 3 values. But what we can also do is actually use it with 4 values to get a level of transparency as well. So here's one with 4. Where's my 4? Here. V1, V2, V3, and then transparency level, which is optional. The background opacity relative to the current color range. So instead of 255, I'm going to make it white. We'll just start with this, make sure it's all the same. Okay, all the same. And then I'm going to add one more number, which will be the opacity. I'll just make it half of 255. Oh, you can see they're a bit blurry. It's not quite opaque enough. I'll turn that down. Ooh, now they're getting, we got a real feeling of speed now on those speedy ones. Turn it down a little bit more. Now it sort of looks like slow motion. This is like the slow motion frames across the, while someone's running across the finish line. And this one, it's Jamaica in front, as always, down in the 4th lane. I'm not sure where Australia is in this. Probably not good in the sprints, but and even blurrier. Keep turning this down. we get blurrier and blurrier until we get this kind of smear across the screen. Cool, to turn this down to something really low. I used to love making artworks and making this really low opacity so things would start to really blur in processing. Aha, I've got someone's interest. That's interesting. Thank you. I do strive to give interesting lectures. Well, 2 is a little bit too low. When you do this in P5, you end up with this kind of pink smear left behind. I think someone always gets around to explaining to me why that's the case. I would have thought it would just eventually go back to white, but it doesn't ever seem to make it. Probably because of the way that the color mixing works. And this one's smear is not very long because it's very slow. Okay, that's enough of the circle sketches. I might go back to my lecture even though I've lost it. anu.edu.au/courses/comp7020/lectures/week 2. And go through all these slides we've already been in. We can go in the overview mode. Oh, too far. Okay. Thanks for joining me on that Olympic demo. We're about halfway through the lecture now. We'll see how we go for time. We may finish a little early if we run out of demo material and I run out of interesting things to do. You can change the blend mode, Marcus. I see on the chat. Yeah, there's people saying things about blend mode, things about kind of the maths of how we're multiplying colors together to get the changes in color with the background overlaying, the transparencies over the top. I'm sure there's a way to solve that, but it's probably not a week 2 thing. It's probably more of an advanced P5 technique. Variables, overview of variables. Some numbers are always the same, just like 100. We have a lot of numbers which are always the same in my sketch. No matter how many times you run that draw loop, 100 will always be 100. Some numbers are always the same, but they've got names, okay? Like pi, right? Pi never changes. No matter how much people would like it to, it's always the same. There's some numbers which change or vary over time. Maybe your age or numbers of planets in the solar system. Sometimes a constant, sometimes a variable. We call those ones a variable. They change over time. The next thing we're going to do is make our own variables, which is where things start to get interesting. So in programming, a variable is how we give a name to a value which can change. And this is handy because a lot of the times we are dealing with numbers that we would like to change. We're dealing with circles that will move across the page, things in your sketch which you want to react or change in a certain way. We'll talk a lot about these things in the rest of the course, and all of your other assignments except for assignment 1 will require you to have changes in how your code runs through these draw loops. Variables, the name stays the same, but the value can change. We've talked a little bit about frame count already, but frame count is really representative of time in P5. So time is represented with numbers, just like position and just like color. There's several different ways to do it actually in P5. The main one we're going to use is frame count. That's mainly what I'll use in lectures. It measures the number of times you run through that draw loop. Every time you go through it, it gets to implements by 1. But this is a kind of relative time. It's not like looking at the wall and saying, oh, it's 4 o'clock. It can sort of tell you the time since your sketch started running. But sometimes this is where things get a little bit hairy. If you've got a lot of code in your draw loop, you're doing a lot of things, maybe the draw loop will slow down sometimes. And so time, the number of seconds between one count and the next frame count might change depending on what you do in your sketch. That's unlikely to happen until you've got like quite a long program. So don't worry about that happening in like lab 2. So when we use frame count in our sketches, we allow for change. We get dynamic sketches, not just static ones, which is really where things start to get fun. We can make our Olympics of circles. More variables. A few more variables that P5 gives you for free. There's a few here. Window width is a variable. This was one we used within our sketch, although I didn't talk about it, and window height. 2 variables. This one makes sure that the canvas we create is the width of your window, your browser window, this width. And it's the height of it as well. You can also make a canvas which is smaller and sort of tacked up in the upper left-hand corner. Then we've got the mouse X variable and the mouse Y variable. Those ones are really cool as well, because they get the area on the screen where your mouse cursor is touching. We might play with that in a minute. So if your mouse X is over here, that'll be high X and low Y, right? Because Y, you're close to the top of the screen, but we're far away in the right-hand side of the screen. And if you want to look at all the variables that you've got built in, look in the reference. So it's an image, I don't know what I'm doing here. No, get rid of my, oops. Click that link later. Check out all of the variables you can use. One more thing, and this sort of relates to what was the discussion was before between those numbers like 7 and a number like 5.77. Because 7 was a number which is kind of a counting number, a natural number. You can have 7 of a thing. You can't exactly have 5.77 of some things. So there's different types of numbers. And when we think about this word type within computing, we sometimes think a bit more broadly, because not only can there be different types of numbers, there can be different types of other stuff as well. And the word type starts to be similar to the way that we think of a type of character in a video game, right? Are you a mage or a paladin or a, I don't know, arrow guy or a magic lady or ogre? Something, I don't know, different types of things. Or Pokemon, different types of Pokemon. Like Pikachu is like electric type and Rattata is normal type. Wouldn't you hate to be a normal type Pokemon? How limiting is that? Like you get born and someone looks at you and like, wow, this is great, you're very normal. Wonderful thing to say about a Pokemon. Okay, so as well as a name, every variable in P5 is going to have a type, sometimes called a data type. And within P5, in fact, within JavaScript, the programming language that P5 is created in, you can have exactly this number of different types. You can have numbers, which can be natural numbers or can be fractions or real numbers or decimal numbers. You can have strings, which is what we call text in computer language. You can see that this string hot potato has double quotes around it. Why do we call it a string? Does anyone know? I'll talk about that in a minute. We've got Boolean numbers, Boolean types, which is similar to a number, but it's just only got 2 values, true or false. And that's useful for checking things and choosing which way we go in a program. If something is true, then do this. We'll talk about that a bit later in the semester. We've got another important type called undefined, which is the type of things that we don't know what they are. That's important to note if you ever look at your debugging within the browser. You might see that something is undefined. Oh, it hasn't been given a type. That might be what's going wrong with your sketch. And then this final type called object, which is more of a complicated, a type that contains other types. And we'll get to that in week 4. No one's answered my question. Why do we call text a string in computers? I guess because it's a string of characters one after another. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters in this string, and space is included as a character. And you can see we've said that it's a string of characters and not some other kind of thing within the programming language by putting quote marks around it. You might notice if you're in VS Code and you type a string in, it goes a different color. You see this one's red? That's because VS Code knows it's a string already, and it's handy for VS Code to give it a particular color to tell you it's a string. If we don't put the quote marks around it, you can say VS Code tries to work out what here is. It thinks here might be the name of a variable. And then after that, it gives up, doesn't know what's going on. Red squiggly line. What is all this? This is not correct syntax. Syntax error. No, put the text around it. Ah, I'm happy. That's a string. We'll talk a lot more about types as we go and use them for different things. Mostly numbers so far, right? The text type, string type, is not a number, but mostly numbers at this point. As we go through the semester, we'll see some types of other kinds of stuff. But as you know, right, in P5, we're mainly dealing with numbers, moving, drawing things in different places in the screen, that's a number. Choosing a color, that's a number. Moving a certain number of frames across the screen, that's a number, right? So everything so far is a number that we need to do our drawings. What about making your own variables? So far we've just been using variables that are already given to you by P5. What if I wanted to make my own? Well, we can do so. There's 3 steps. Someone says, why do we call text a string? It's because it's as long as a piece of string. That's very clever. That's not true. So here's the steps for making our own variables or declaring them. The first step is to declare the variable. Hey P5, there's a variable called age. That's how we declare a variable in P5. No, we don't say that. We don't need to yell at P5, we don't need to yell at your computer to declare it. We just need to use this special language. Let age. That's it. That's declaring a variable. That just says to P5, there's a variable called age. The second step is to initialize it, to give it a value. And to do that, we use the equals sign. Age equals 34, means set the age variable to the number 34. Someone started to ask about scope and let. Don't ask me that question now, I've forgotten. We've got a lecture on scope, and I'll explain exactly what that means. It's very much not a week 2 kind of question. I will talk about why that might be a question later. Initialize, so we give our variable a number, age equals 34. Use, when you do refer to a variable in your code, for instance, 2 times age, that means that you're using your variable, and when this code runs, JavaScript pops the value of age into there, 34 goes into where the age is, and then it will execute this maths equation, 2 times 34, and you'll get 68. So you can use numbers that way, use vars. Declaring your own variables. We'll do a bit of this in a minute. You can combine the declaration and initialization steps in one line. This can appear anywhere in your code. Let max equals 100, let min equals 10. If you're used to kind of the mathsy way of talking about numbers or declaring, using representations of numbers, you might think let x equal 100, let y equals 30. So this is a kind of neat way of doing it. You can read it off the page as if you're reading a little bit of maths. If you haven't done maths, then you can think of it anyway. Let max be a variable and let its value be 100. You can also initialize variables using the value of another variable, or even with the result of a calculation. So if we've already got max and min as variables, then we can say let range equal max minus min. Oh, did I miss a semicolon? There's a semicolon missing on this page. Sometimes there are semicolons. Officially in JavaScript, I think you're supposed to use a semicolon at the end of each line, but usually if you forget, it forgives you and it doesn't break. So be in the habit of putting them in anyway. It's sort of tradition in some programming languages to have a semicolon that separates each line of code. There are some other programming languages where the return, the symbol inside the file, which tells it to go to the next line, that's what's required to go to the next line of code. But if you are in any doubt, just put a semicolon after every line of code. So we can initialize variables using numbers, other numbers. Max minus min can be a variable, or we can call a function like this random function, which gives us a random number between 0 and 13. So we can just get a random value, store it in this variable called random value, and then grab it later. We can also modify variables, and this is a little programming pattern which you might not have seen before if you're new to computing, but we do it all the time in computer science. So I've got a value called range, let range. I've been using some range somewhere else. I've initialized it. Let range. Oh, I've lost my pen, can't use it anymore. Oh well, it's back. Equal 50. And then I say range equals range plus 1. Now range is 51. And whoops, forgot my semicolons. Now, if you had this line of code inside your draw loop, then every time you run through that draw loop, range will get added, well, 1 will be added to range. It will keep going up, just like frame count. So you can have other variables that, similarly to frame count, will change as your code runs. That might be really useful if you're trying to count the number of times you take a certain action or do something. You can change this range. We'll be using that a lot in the loops section. Now, I had a little bit of like horror happening in the chat about using var and let. As it turns out, in JavaScript, there are 2 different words you can use to declare a variable. One of them is let, and one of them is var. So var is an older way of doing more or less the same thing. There are some differences that you probably won't notice if you're just using let and var. You're just using let. Some people may be super interested in JavaScript already and they want to keep using var. Fine, I don't care. Use whatever you want. It's absolutely fine to use var. But let is sort of the more modern and more currently accepted way of declaring variables. So I'm changing things in this course to use let instead of var. One thing to note, there's no let declaration the second time. Once you declare a variable, it's declared for good until you're in an area of your program that can't see it anymore or it doesn't need it. We will talk about the differences between var and let, but it will be in a later lecture. I should note, in general, we'll learn these things by using them in your labs. You don't need to have like a special cheat sheet for knowing how to declare a variable. You'll probably be able to remember that after doing it a million times in your labs. Finally, a little note about maths. We've already started to use some mathematical operators. Mostly we'll just be using the mathematical operators that you've seen in primary school in this course. Plus, minus, times, divide. They all work completely well in P5, no problems. You can look in the JavaScript reference if you want to learn more about arithmetic operators, but it's something that we do a lot of practice in the labs rather than explaining bit by bit in lectures. Now we're going to do a bit more work with variables and starting interactivity. And our little demo for today is going to be based on this art practice by Katarina Grossman. Sorry, I forgot what the artist's name was. Katarina Gross, who is a painter and creates large format painting artworks using spray paint. So here's It's either Katerina Gross or one of Katerina Gross's assistants up a ladder, spray painting a wall to create this large artwork. And this is something we're just going to try in P5, see if we can start to do some hand drawing with the mouse. So, back to my sketch, eh? We'll stop that little ball, that little circle is the little circle that could. Eventually it will finish this race. We'll get a pat on the back from the other circles who've already had their press conferences and everything. But it's the little circle that could. All right, get rid of most of those circles. And we're going to get rid of the frame count. And we will start to do some drawing. So in fact, I'm going to get rid of both the X and Y location of my first circle. I've got one circle here. Get rid of this background, just keep that around and use a plain white background for the moment. 255. Now, this is very simple. We're just going to put in the location of the mouse, the variables that refer to the mouse's X and Y locations. In here, we've got mouse X, and we've got mouse Y. You might notice that when we've got a variable name that has more than one word in it, the second word has a capital letter. That's a kind of accepted way of naming things within many programming languages, JavaScript included, but also Java. It's called camel case. It's called camel case because you end up with little humps in your word, right? Window width. And if you've got a very long variable name that describes something that's more complicated, you'll have lots more capital letters inside it. Some people think it's terribly ugly, but it's become pretty accepted. Okay, there's my red circle, and right now it's in the top left-hand corner up here because I haven't given it a mouse X or mouse Y value yet, so it thinks that mouse X is 0, mouse Y is 0. But as soon as I put my mouse into the screen, whoa, we've got a moving ball moving all over the screen. Well, that's cool. An interactive sketch. We're ready. This can be a major artwork. Major project done. Tick. Submit it. Finish the course. No, I think it doesn't quite have enough. Doesn't quite have enough je ne sais quoi for that final major project feeling. It doesn't have the special something that makes it an artwork yet. What if we start drawing on the screen? So rather than deleting the background every frame, I'll use the code I had before to make its background fade out. Make the background fade out. Oh. Well, that's a bit better, isn't it? What if no mouse function? No mouse. Someone's asked me a question that I don't know the answer to. What is no mouse function? You can tell me. So I've got my drawing machine right now with a circle. Now maybe I want to store some more variables. So I might make a few variables. I'm going to say let circle size equal 50. And then instead of, put this right up the top of my code here. So sometimes this is a good place to declare and keep your variables that you're going to use anywhere in your code, right at the top. If you want to use them anywhere in your code, store them there. So instead of putting in the size of my circle as a literal number, I'm going to use that variable, circle size. Circle size. All right, now I've got a smaller circle. So far, so good. I can draw, I can make this kind of pink background. I'm not really sure if that's what I want to do with my sketch. I might want to keep everything I've been doing and instead have the mouse draw a color which is sort of semi-transparent, sort of like that spray paint effect that Katarina Gross was using. So I'll make my background, instead of using the background every draw loop, I'll use it once in the setup and then keep it, not use it again. Okay, so now I'm drawing with the mouse. Everybody, I can't draw anymore. I don't have a very large screen. There's a lot of screen space to do it here. There's a discussion going on about safe code, no mouse going on in the chat. I'm not sure if these are questions that are meant for me or if they're questions that are not understand. Oh, okay, Gene's got a question. What's the difference between putting code in the setup flow and anywhere outside the draw flow? That's a good question. I think that if you put drawing code, P5 code outside of setup, it won't work. The setup code is run after the P5 library has sort of been initialized. So it knows how to draw on the background. It knows how to draw within the browser. So I can put code here which is JavaScript, like storing variables, declaring variables, but I can't do drawing in that area. That's what I think. And then when your draw loop runs, that will run multiple times. Your setup loop will run once, your setup function runs once, then the draw loop runs multiple times. But if I try to draw like a big rectangle here, whoops, I think my code actually won't work. Well, it didn't draw the rectangle anyway, so it didn't get drawn. If I stop the background, what will happen? No, still don't get that rectangle. So if you're trying to draw outside of the setup and draw areas, it's not going to work. But you can declare variables out there. Oops. Uh-oh, I don't want to save it. Okay, so I want to save this and start again. So now I might, yep, setup executes once. Someone's mentioned this, so this is the flow concept. There's some code here which will be executed or computed by the computer that will run at the start. Then your setup function will run. You can do some drawing within that setup or change the values of your variables or something. And then your draw loop will run, and then it will run again and again and again and again and again until you close the browser window. Yeet. Okay. Now I want to draw in a slightly different way. I'm going to get rid of the stroke. You remember that was the way of putting a border on an object. So I'm just going to say no stroke. In fact, that's a good thing to put in the setup area. We don't need to run that multiple times. We can just run it once. No stroke. I don't have to have a stroke color now. And I can actually change the color of my red dot to be somewhat transparent. So I'm going to make it 50 out of 255 for transparency. Ooh. How do we make our lines smooth? That's a really great extension task for the lab. I'm going to remember that one and ask you to figure it out in your lab too. How to make a line smooth. For now, I'm just going to use these, draw with these ellipses if you don't mind, because I like them. They're not smooth. And that's part of the reason they're fun. Okay. So far we've got a variable for our circle size, and we've got our color represented by a constant. But maybe what I'd like to do is to start changing my color. So I'm going to say let fill red equal 255, let fill green equal 0, let fill blue equal 0. So I'm now using some variables for my color. Okay, so far it's the same code. But variables really get fun when the number changes, don't they? So I've declared and initialized those variables, and now I'm going to modify them. So I might say fill red equals fill red plus 1. Fill green equals fill green plus 0.5. And fill blue equals, someone was talking about the cos command. I might do some cos of frame count. This is getting to be a bit of more complicated maths. Now cos outputs a number between -1 and 1. So I'm going to add 1. Now it's a number between 0 and 2. This is getting a bit mathsy for you. You just might want to hold on. I'm going to multiply that by half of 255, so it's sort of a number between 0 and 255 after that. This looks a bit complicated, doesn't it? 127 times 1 plus cos frame count. Manipulating little numbers to get something interesting is part of the fun that I like to have in my artistic practice with P5. I know it doesn't necessarily have to be your artistic practice with it, but you know, it's a good thing to try out and see if it appeals to you. Ooh. So now I've got a changing color. Well, that's kind of cool, isn't it? So you can see for a while it was changing, and then it sort of just locked onto yellow. And it's probably because once fill red gets to be 255, it can't really go any further. The number gets bigger, but the color can't get any more redder than 255 is the maximum. And similarly with fill green. So what I might do is do another bit of maths. So both of them, I'm going to use the percent sign, percent 255. This is a mathematical operator which you didn't learn in primary school, or you did, but you called it a different name. You remember in primary school when you were doing division, 5 divided by 2? Well, what's 5 divided by 2? 2.5. Well, what about in real numbers, in natural numbers? Well, it's 2, remainder 1. 5 divided by 2, you get 2 groups of 2, and then 1 left over. This operator gets you what's left over, the remainder, when you divide by 255. So it's a nice way of limiting a number. So if this number at fill red is getting higher and higher and higher, getting up to 255, if it's less than 255, the remainder when dividing it by 255 is the same as the number we put in. If it's 256, then dividing it by 255 will give us 1, remainder 1. So 255, 256%, 255 equals 1. In computer science, we call this the modulo operator. So I'd say there's fill red plus 1 modulo 255. Well, that's a mouthful if you haven't heard it before, but it's handy. You might end up using it in your labs and practicing with it. Let's see if it works. Whoops, I pressed the wrong Control S in the wrong window again. Now I'm starting to get colors that change over time. Well, that's cool. I'm doing my spray paint artwork. And probably if I was going to spend a bit more time in this, I might be able to find some way of slowing down the color changes so that it changes a bit more slowly. There's been some good suggestions in the chat about ways to make my lines smooth so I don't have these sort of separate dots between each frame. So when I move my mouse fast, they move between. There's little spaces between them all. But for now, this is a pretty good attempt. Might pop back to the lecture slides and just finish this lecture off. So this is your to-do list for this week. This week's week 2, you still have to go to your week 2 labs, which start tomorrow morning. Make sure you've done your pre-lab before your lab starts. Make sure you go through and achieve all of your lab tasks. Your tutor will help you with that. Your tutor will be checking in with you, particularly if you're in an online lab, to make sure that you're collaborating, working together, doing what you need to do. I suppose next week on Monday's lecture, I'll remind you about the week 3 pre-lab. I haven't actually got that in the lab file yet. This course is run a number of times, and every time a course gets run, we alter a few things, update them, and change them. And this year, one of the things we're doing is adding a pre-lab task to every lab. We did have something similar, but a little bit different last year. So I'll need to get ahead of myself and get a few weeks ahead. At the moment, I'm only just catching up. So I've got the pre-lab for this week, but not for week 3. So keep an eye on the website to see when that comes out. Make sure you've got access to your tools. Thanks, Avery, for that really cool diagram of all the tools which are in the lecture slides. Keep practicing and start assignment 1. I've got a few things to read about if you want to do some further reading. There's articles on variables and control flow on MDN, which is the Mozilla Development Network. A great place to read about how JavaScript and the web works. There's a YouTube channel which I find really useful by a teacher at New York University called Dan Schiffman. He's got some great videos within his theme called The Coding Train about P5 drawing. He wrote a great book on P5, which you can read online in the library. You can also have a look at a great video about Katarina Gross in fiction. So we'll probably talk a bit more about art that uses different kinds of variables on Thursday, random variables. And until then, that's all I got. So just going to turn to outro, and I'll see you folks on Thursday. See you later. Feel free to ask any more questions in the chat. I'll be here for another couple of minutes. Thanks everybody who is in the chat interacting with me live. It's just so nice to get live interactions in lectures, because it really gives you, it gives me something to talk about. You know, I get this live view about what parts of the lecture are complicated, and what parts are not complicated, what things you understand, what things you want to know more about. And I can just react to it right in the moment. So it makes it a much more interesting experience and a much more interesting lecture. I guess it can make it a bit disjointed, because I might be reading a slide and someone types in a really good question, and I then have to sort of stop reading the slide, go to the question, think about that, think about an answer. And even if I don't intend to answer it right now, I might pause a little bit just to check what the comment was. But it's still really, really useful to have you folks there. So thank you so much for coming. Well, now I might just stop the thank you parade and stop my stream. Oh, there's a question. Someone's asked a question, and dare I say it, but if you head over to the website, if you head over to the resources page, to the FAQ, you might find a section called "How was the assignment marked?" If you look in the FAQ, it's a huge page, but there's a table of contents and there's assignments, and it will say, how do you mark assignments? I'll read it out to you. We don't have a marking guide for assignments. Marks in the assignments are not determined by passing tests, but by the quality of your interactive artworks and the attainment of the learning outcomes. We consider at least the following aspects: success in terms of meeting the assignment specification, depth of artistic process and conceptualization, artistic and interactive quality and sophistication, code and technical quality and sophistication, clarity of communication and expression, And in fact, you don't get separate marks for each of these aspects. You just get one mark, which we determine just from the whole package, including the technical aspects, including the artistic aspects, including how you've communicated what you were trying to do through your artistic statement, which is also part of the assignment. You get 1 mark for your assignments, the 3 assignments. That mark will be out of 10. And then for the, that mark will be out of 10, but they're worth 15%. It's just easier to give a mark out of 10 rather than a mark out of 15. Because then you know if you got an 8 right, you're tracking towards getting a high distinction. If you're getting 9 or 10, high distinction. 6, 7 or 8's maybe a distinction. 7 or 8's distinction. 6 is a credit, 5's a pass, and less than 5 is not what we're expecting, below what we're expecting. So I know that can be a bit challenging. You just get 1 holistic mark, but I think what I want to communicate to you is that when you're creating something like an artwork, it is a holistic object. We look at the whole thing, and maybe for some folks, they're really focused on artistic aspects. Some folks are really focused on technical aspects. We can shift a little bit what that balance is, depending on what the background or what the goals are of that particular person. So I do like having this holistic view. Otherwise, when we get students who are differently balanced, because we get a big range of students here in this course, I can't look at their work holistically and say, yes, that's fantastic, that's an HD. I might have to say, look, the artistic idea, it looks fantastic, it's amazing, but you haven't used enough for loops, so therefore it's not an HD, right? To me, that would be insane to mark things in that way. But that's the constraint that you end up with when you separate marks for each separate part of an assignment. So these are holistically marked assignments. Okay, I'm going to go unless there are more questions.